The seed knows what to do. This is the thing about gardening that no other human activity provides. The collaboration between intention and biology that produces the specific, irreducible miracle of the planted seed becoming the edible thing. You prepare the soil. You place the seed. You water. You watch. And the seed, which does not need your help to know what it is supposed to become, becomes it. The tomato, the bean, the lettuce that appeared in April from the seeds pressed into the cold frame in February. The zucchini that arrived with the specific, unstoppable abundance that zucchini always arrives with, producing more than the household needs and requiring the specific social negotiation of finding neighbors willing to accept more zucchini than they planned for. The garden is the oldest collaboration between humans and the living world. 10,000 years old. Practiced on every inhabited continent. In every climate that permits it. By every culture that has settled long enough to learn what the local soil will grow. It is, in the most literal sense, what civilization is. The transition from following the food to growing the food. The decision to stay. The knowledge accumulated in staying about this soil and this season and this seed. And in our scenario, it is illegal. Not farming. Farming has its own regulatory framework, its own exemptions and supports. The backyard garden, the raised bed, the container tomato on the apartment balcony, the community garden plot, the kitchen herb window box. All of it prohibited by legislation that cites food safety concerns, pesticide, and water runoff regulation, urban planning standards, incompatible with residential food cultivation, and the commercial agricultural industry's concerns about unregulated food production competing with licensed food operations. The seed knows what to do, but the law says it cannot. Approximately 35% of American households grow some of their own food. Approximately 18 million households maintain food gardens of varying scales, from the single container tomato plant on a balcony to the half-acre kitchen garden that provides a significant portion of a family's summer produce. The home food garden generates approximately $25 billion in retail value annually. The estimated market value of the produce that home gardeners grow and do not therefore purchase. The participation spans every demographic. The low-income household whose garden supplements a food budget that does not extend to adequate fresh produce. The middle-income household whose garden provides the specific quality and freshness of just picked vegetables that the grocery store cannot replicate. The suburban family whose children are learning where food comes from in the only direct way learning is possible, by watching it grow. The elderly gardener whose relationship with the soil spans decades and whose physical and cognitive health benefits from the continued engagement. The community garden serves the urban resident without a yard. The apartment dweller whose plot in the community garden is their access to the soil, and the growing and the community of people who tend plots beside them. In our scenario, the Residential and Community Food Safety and Agricultural Standards Act, motivated by concerns about pesticide runoff from unregulated residential gardens, water usage in drought-affected regions, foodborne illness from improperly cultivated produce, and the commercial agricultural industry's lobbying for level competitive conditions, bans all non-commercially licensed food cultivation. The tomato in the raised bed is illegal. The herb pot on the windowsill is illegal. The community garden plot is illegal. The 30 years of accumulated soil knowledge in the woman's backyard are permitted to exist. They are not permitted to be used. To understand the full consequence of banning residential food gardens, we must understand what gardening actually does, in the full range of its health, economic, educational, social, and ecological functions. Gardening is a physical and mental health intervention. The research on gardening and health outcomes is extensive and consistent. Regular gardening activity produces measurable reductions in stress hormones, cortisol levels that decline with soil contact in ways that other outdoor activities do not equivalently produce. The specific mechanism, contact with Mycobacterium vaccae, a harmless soil bacterium that triggers serotonin production, has been identified in controlled research as a literal biochemical benefit of getting one's hands in the ground. Gardening provides the specific combination of low-intensity physical activity, cognitive engagement, and sensory immersion in a natural environment that multiple health research streams identify as beneficial for both physical and mental health. The elderly gardener who maintains their garden into their 70s and 80s demonstrates, in research on aging and activity, lower rates of cognitive decline, better physical functional capacity, and higher self-reported life satisfaction than the equivalent population that does not garden. The mental health benefits are particularly significant for populations at elevated risk of depression and anxiety. The research on therapeutic horticulture has produced sufficient evidence to support horticultural therapy as a clinical intervention in multiple healthcare contexts. The ban on residential food gardening is not merely the prohibition of a hobby. It is the prohibition of a health intervention, delivered at no cost to the public health system, available to anyone with a patch of soil or a container on a balcony, producing its benefits through the simple mechanism of growing things. Gardening is a food security mechanism for low-income households. This is the function that the food policy community has documented most carefully, and that the gardening ban's proponents least adequately considered. The low-income household that maintains a vegetable garden is not gardening as a lifestyle choice. They are extending a food budget that does not extend to adequate fresh produce without the garden supplement. The tomato that costs $1.89 at the grocery store costs approximately $3.12 to grow from a plant that the household purchased for $3.99, and that will produce 40 tomatoes across the season. The arithmetic of home food production favors the gardener by margins that are significant for households operating at the margins of food security. The USDA's research on food gardening and food security consistently identifies home food production as a meaningful contributor to fresh produce access in low-income households. The households for whom the food dessert is not an abstraction, but the description of the grocery options within reach of a bus route. Ban the garden and close the supplement. The food budget that was stretched by the garden must stretch further without it. Or the fresh produce that the garden provided is not replaced. Gardening is the food literacy curriculum that no school fully replicates. The child who grows a tomato understands something about food that the child who buys a tomato does not. Not merely where food comes from, though that understanding, in a generation whose relationship with food production is increasingly abstract, is not trivial. The understanding of what food is, the biological reality of it, the seasonal logic of it, the specific embodied knowledge that comes from tending a living thing through its growth and harvesting the result. The child who grew the tomato is a different kind of food citizen than the child who bought it, more likely to eat it. The research on children's produce consumption consistently finds that children who grow vegetables eat more vegetables, more likely to understand the food system, the agricultural labor, the seasonal variation, the biological reality of the supply chain that the grocery store aisle abstracts, more capable of food self-sufficiency, the knowledge of growing food that is, in any genuinely adverse circumstance, the most fundamental survival skill available. Ban the garden and remove the curriculum. Move thee. The next generation of food citizens will know less about food than the generation that grew tomatoes in the backyard. Community gardens are social infrastructure. This is the function that the urban planning literature has most carefully documented, and that the gardening ban would most visibly disrupt. The community garden is not primarily a food production facility. It is a community formation mechanism. The specific, productive, shared activity of tending adjacent plots produces the incidental social contact that generates community in ways that residential proximity alone does not. The conversation across the bed boundary about the aphids on the tomatoes. The exchange of surplus zucchini. The social negotiation of abundance that requires the neighbor relationship to resolve. The shared knowledge of the plot allocation system and the water schedule and the seasonal rhythms that everyone who gardens there shares. The community garden is, in the urban environment where anonymous residential proximity is the norm, one of the few reliably productive community formation mechanisms available. Its prohibition is the prohibition of the community it produces. The prohibition of residential food cultivation has historical precedents. None of them are encouraging. The Soviet Union's system of dachas, the small country plots available to urban workers for food cultivation, was not a lifestyle amenity. It was a food security system. Soviet urban residents who maintained dacha gardens supplemented the inadequate official food supply with the produce their dachas generated. When the Soviet system collapsed in 1991 and the official food supply contracted dramatically, the dacha garden was the food security mechanism that prevented the food crisis from becoming a famine. The research on Soviet food security during the transition period consistently identifies the dacha garden as the critical buffer between the collapse of the official food system and the kind of food catastrophe that the official system's failure might otherwise have produced. The United States' own Victory Garden program, which during World War II covered approximately 20 million home and community gardens producing approximately 40% of the fresh vegetables consumed by the civilian population, represents the most dramatic domestic example of residential food cultivation as public policy. The government did not merely permit residential food cultivation during World War II. It mandated it. The recognition that home food production is a food security asset, that the distributed, resilient, infrastructure-independent production of millions of home gardens provides a supply resilience that centralized commercial agriculture cannot, was explicit in the Victory Garden program's design. The gardening prohibition in our scenario is the inversion of the Victory Garden's logic. The program that was created because residential food cultivation was understood as essential to national resilience is replaced by a prohibition based on the premise that residential food cultivation is a regulatory problem. Cuba's response to the special period, the economic crisis that followed the Soviet Union's collapse, and the loss of Soviet agricultural subsidies, provides the most extensively studied contemporary example of urban food cultivation as a public health intervention. Facing food shortages of crisis proportions, the Cuban government converted every available urban space to food production. The rooftop gardens, the urban farm plots, the community gardens that emerged in vacant lots across Havana. The program, documented and studied extensively by food security researchers, produced measurable improvements in Cuban food security and nutritional outcomes during the crisis years. The lesson of Cuba is not that urban gardening can replace commercial agriculture. It is that residential and urban food cultivation is a resilience resource that becomes visible in its value when the commercial food system is disrupted. Prohibit it in normal times, and you eliminate the resilience before the disruption arrives. In the immediate aftermath of the ban, the legal compliance would be immediate and the consequences delayed. The household that removes the raised beds from the backyard to comply with the prohibition does not immediately experience food insecurity. The community garden that closes because the prohibition eliminates its legal basis does not immediately impoverish its members. The impacts accumulate. Over the growing season, that does not happen. Over the food budget that was supplemented by the garden and is no longer supplemented. Over the community that gathered at the garden plots and has no plots to gather around. The low-income household food security impact would be measurable within months. The household that was supplementing its produce consumption through the home garden would face the specific arithmetic problem of fresh produce costs that the food budget had not previously needed to fully cover. The tomato that cost $0.12 to grow now costs $1.89 to buy. The lettuce that grew in the raised bed from March through November now costs $3.49 per head at the grocery store. The herb garden that reduced the household's spice and seasoning costs now requires the grocery store's herb section. For the low-income household at the margin of food security, these arithmetic increases are not trivial adjustments. They are the removal of the supplement that made the food budget work. Without the supplement, the food budget does not work in the same way. Fresh produce consumption declines. The household eats less of what the garden provided and more of what the budget can still cover, which is not the fresh produce the garden replaced. The underground garden would emerge. This is the consequence that every prohibition of something people genuinely need produces. The garden is not a luxury that people can easily relinquish. It is the 30 years of accumulated soil knowledge in the woman's backyard. It is the low-income household's food supplement. It is the elderly person's health intervention. It is the child's education. These are not the things that people stop doing because a law says to stop. The community garden that officially closes continues operating as an informal arrangement among members who collectively decide that the law is wrong. The backyard garden that the household officially removes from the raised beds continues in containers on the back porch that are technically ornamental plants that happen to be producing tomatoes. The window box that officially contains geraniums happens to contain basil and parsley, and the small chili pepper that the household has been growing for years. The underground garden would be widespread, unenforceable without a surveillance apparatus whose cost and intrusiveness would make the prohibition politically untenable, and a daily demonstration that the prohibition had misjudged what the garden was and what it meant to the people who maintained it. The gardening ban is not important. By the measure of the legislation that produced it, by the metrics of pesticide runoff regulation, water usage management, food safety compliance, and the commercial agricultural industry's competitive concerns, the residential food garden is not important enough to remain unregulated. The regulatory concerns are real. Residential pesticide use contributes to urban water quality issues. Residential water use for gardens is significant in drought-affected regions. Food safety standards exist for documented reasons. These are legitimate regulatory objects, and they could be addressed with regulations that target the specific harms. Pesticide use restrictions that govern what home gardeners can apply without governing whether they can garden. Water use regulations that restrict irrigation methods during drought conditions without restricting food cultivation. Food safety standards applicable to food shared or sold beyond the household without restricting food grown for household consumption. The surgical regulation that addresses the documented harms while preserving the documented goods. The ban chose prohibition, and the prohibition eliminates not merely the regulatory problems. It eliminates the 30 years of accumulated soil knowledge. The food security supplement for the low-income household. The health intervention for the elderly gardener. The food literacy curriculum for the child who grew the tomato. The community formation mechanism of the community garden. The resilience resource that, in any genuine disruption of the commercial food system, represents the distributed, infrastructure-independent production capacity that the Victory Garden program recognized as essential. All of it prohibited. Because the regulation that was designed to address the specific problems of residential food cultivation was written broadly enough to prohibit the cultivation itself, and the woman at the kitchen window, looking at the empty raised beds, at the soil that remembers the 30 years, is the consequence. Not dramatic, not in the language of crisis, in the language of the June morning that does not have the green tomato it was supposed to have, and the seed on the windowsill that knows what to do, if given the chance, which the law has not given, but which the kitchen window and the container and the 30 years of knowing have found a way to give anyway, because the seed knows, even when the law doesn't, what June mornings are supposed to contain.